Welcome to Where I'm From, the podcast that proves that no matter how far you go, you'll always keep a little piece of home with you. I'm Bill Meeks. This week, original meme maker and design manager at Roblox, Dino Ignacio, joins me to talk about where he's from, the old wide web. Flip on your modems, folks. We're doing a barrel roll through the history of the internet.
We're riding on the internet, cyberspace set free. Hello, virtual reality.
Interactive appetite, searching for a website, a window to the world, got to get online.
Take a spin, now you're in with the techno set. You're going surfing on the internet.
You might know Dino for his work on the UIs in games like the Dead Space franchise and Dante's Inferno. Maybe you've seen his work as the UI UX lead on the Oculus VR system. And he's currently the senior design manager for a little game called Roblox. God, I know my kids have played it enough. But before all that, Dino created one of the early internet's first memes, a satirical website called Bert Is Evil, all about that grumpy Sesame Street Muppet and his proclivity for debauchery. For folks of a certain age like me and Dino, you could say we're from the World Wide Web. It shaped us, gave us direction. It even gave us the power to make fun of children's television and effect a protest halfway around the world. Today, I'm talking to Dino about his memories of the early internet and how his site, Bert Is Evil, led to his current career at the top of the tech industry.
Welcome.
Okay, we're connected. Let's go. And I'd like to welcome Dino Ignacio to Where I'm From. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Bill.
I do think it's funny that before we started the recording, you're coming in because of your tech background, and we had tech issues. I mean, you can never win. Like, you can program in COBOL and know all sorts of variables, and you still end up running into an issue with AirPods.
No, yeah, I mean, a lot of that happens in my life. I think I'm pretty technically savvy, but something always goes wrong for me in my life. I feel like I don't know if you ever feel this, but when I'm stressed out, I feel like all the technology around me starts to break. I don't know what it is, but maybe we start projecting more of the electromagnetic energy. I don't know what it is, but yeah, everything starts to break.
Well, it's like, technology is a matrix, right? And it's maybe even a spider web's a better metaphor. And when you feel like one thread vibrating, you can't focus on any of the other threads. I have to deal with what's going on here.
So true. Yep.
Oh, hey, friends. Today's featured internet superstar won a Webby Award way back in 1998 in the category of Best Weird Website. But he had no idea just how truly weird the geopolitical implications of that site would get a few years later after the towers fell in New York. From the classic...
Just to give people a little bit about background about me and you, I believe the first time I got in contact with you was when I was producing an episode of my first podcast ever called Old Wide Web, all about Bert Is Evil.
To know where the internet is going, you have to know where it's been. Every episode will examine the sites, terms, and personalities that have defined the online world. So strap on your chrono belts, time cadets. It's time to take a trip to the Old Wide Web. Episode 1. The Muppets Take Bangladesh. Hi, I'm Bill Meeks, and welcome to the first episode of Old Wide Web.
I don't remember if I reached out to you for any original journalism, but I know I reached out to you after the fact, and you really liked the segment we did, and it's on the Bert Is Evil Wikipedia page now.
It is. Which amazing work, by the way. And I'll be honest, it took me a while to listen to it, Bill. And I'll tell you why. I feel awkward when I read about myself or hear about myself. And so you sent it to me, and I think it took me a whole 6 to 8 months to even listen to it.
Wow.
And that's not on that's not because of the content you made. It was because of my own way of handling stuff written or said about me.
Well, the guy who created that content, it was about 10 years ago he did it, so he's not going to take offense to it. He's dead now. We are going to focus a lot today on the history of our history on the internet, because I thought that was a really fun angle to go about. But why not, right up top here, why don't you go ahead, for the record, tell us where you're from?
Yeah, let's go with the most benign version of that, which is that I was born and raised in the Philippines. I lived there in Manila for 25 years, 25 years. I moved to San Francisco in 1999, and then eventually moved to Seattle, which is where I am now, in 2015, and I've been here for 7 years now. So I think I'm from the internet, right? I think through all this, from my youth in the Philippines, where if you know anything about the Philippines from the 70s, which is when I was born, we were under a martial law, which meant that our government was aspiring to be a lot more westernized for whatever reason. And so I was educated in, my education, the entertainment and the business that I was around was very much like westernized and in English. And so even though I was from there, many of the things that I found as like part of my cultural and pop cultural upbringing was coming from everywhere in the world. And the internet, back in the early 90s became a big part of that.
So I'm guessing then it's safe to say that you kind of got did you get your first exposure to the internet in the Philippines?
This is going to sound really silly now, but I remember it was 1993, 1994. A friend of mine. So for context, I went to high school in a international high school. So I had classmates from all over the world, expats and whatnot. And I had a buddy who had given me hand-me-down a 14.4 modem, which I used in 1995 to connect to CompuServe in America. And just to give you an idea, that's very expensive because I'm basically making an overseas call to America just to connect to the internet, and at the time it wasn't even the web; it was literally just CompuServe.
Hello. You know this place. It's big, it's moving, it's never the same. How do you keep up? How do you plug in? Get global. Go CompuServe. Millions of people are already there. Tapped into cool places, sights to see, music to hear, movies to watch, or not. New keys to computing, tips to trade, and ways to cheat. News of the day, ways to invest, places to shop with no pushy salesman. Ideas to consider, answers to big questions and small. Plug into the world's largest online village, CompuServe, and tap into fun. No matter what your taste, we've got your flavor. Try some.
CompuServe, that was a fun one. Wasn't that the one that it had like, you didn't have a username, you had like a series of numbers like 76541, blah, 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 blah.
Exactly.
So did you connect that? Because I know CompuServe was one of the first exposures to the internet I ever had. We had to use like a telnet, or not a telnet program, but like a terminal program in Windows to connect to it. And it was all text-based. You could download files, but was that the CompuServe you were on, or?
I was exactly that. There was like some sort of service. You'd log on and you could I think it was like go and then a word like go Star Trek or whatever. And then it'll get you to the Star Trek part of it all. Most of it was text, but you could download images. And I remember taking a good 4 hours just to download a small 500 pixel image of Voyager, which was the new thing coming out back then.
And I'm sure it was all grainy and like 4 colors. So it looked like crap.
It looked like crap. But it was like, oh my gosh, I'm connected to the internet. That and BBSs. Yep.
Oh, BBSs were great. Did you ever play, what was some of the door games I used to play? Legends of the Red Dragon?
Why does that sound so familiar? My memories are flashing back. I don't think I may have tried to check it out, but I don't think I got too deep into it.
It was one of those ones that most BBSs you would sign on to had a version of it because it was really extensible and people would make their own custom worlds for it. So, every BBS had their own flavor.
I may have landed on some variant of it in the Philippines. Maybe that's why it's ringing a bell.
Going back to CompuServe for a minute too, something that, and I don't know if you noticed this or not, but the more nerdy professions like comic book writers, they were all on there, and you could go and you could talk to them in the message boards and stuff.
It was a golden moment in time where, writers, comic book artists. Oh, here's something random. The original voice of Barney, the dinosaur, had a early, this was past CompuServe, but early, he had a website. He was a designer, but he was the voice of Barney, and everyone who was on the internet back then was just cutting edge, trying to break through the industry in new different ways. And we were corresponding a lot.
It was an exciting environment too. It felt like versus today where everything is very tamped down and corporate controlled and you have to go into these certain walled silos to share your content. It was just completely free and open, not just, things like CompuServe and the message boards, but, Usenet news groups and, random FTP sites that would have a bunch of software and stuff.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
What were some of your favorite places to hang out on the early internet?
Geocities, just the random sites on Geocities that I would find. Fark.com.
I think Fark's still around.
Is it still? Oh gosh.
I think so. Yeah. Yeah.
I can't remember the names right now, but there were some really, is it awful.com? Is that one of them?
Rotten.com. You might be thinking.
Rotten.com.
That was all sorts of gross out, and people getting beheaded.
Oh my gosh, it was so horrible. I've still got some of the images vividly in my head. But yeah, a lot of those creepy, weird sites were top of the list for me.
And we'll get to your creepy, weird site in a second. Don't worry. Actually, you know what? Why don't we go ahead and get into it right now? So, Bert Is Evil was I believe, a sub-site on your sort of a web portal you'd created called Fractal Cow. Why don't you tell people a little bit about what Fractal Cow was and how it came to be and all that?
Yeah. So again, this was probably 1996. I had just from using the internet for CompuServe, and then finally ISP's opening in the Philippines, I took the opportunity to learn how to make a website. Back then, I remember being a person that made lots of zines and finding ways to get my poetry and my art out there.
Yeah.
And my only outlet was to photocopy a bunch of these things, bring them to music venues or cafes and drop them off. And the only desire was not even to make money, but just for my stuff to be seen. We were coming from that generation where there was no outlet, right?
Yeah.
And then the internet suddenly became an opportunity to have an audience of thousands, if not millions. And how mind-blowing that was for someone in the Philippines, right?
Yeah. Once the internet really got cooking in 95, 96, you'd see national or local news stations once or twice a month at bare minimum have some story about how this person posted something random on their website that had a blank tag at the top, and now they have a book deal.
Yeah. The other part, it was the first time media was a two-way road, right? Again, coming from the perspective of a kid from the Philippines just trying to absorb information, my connection to the world was magazines. And back then, before hyperlink, right? Before the idea of hyperlink, I don't know if you ever felt this, Bill, but you would read a magazine and there would be some clip about David Bowie, and you're like, oh, that's cool. And next week you find another book or magazine or movie, and there's that's talking about David Bowie, and these amazing hyperlinks start forming in your head where the internet wasn't there. And then to suddenly be exposed to this medium that allows hyperlinks and things are actually interconnected, you could bookmark stuff and much more. You could be part of it. You could create content that can be part of it. Was mind-blowing. And so Fractal Cow, to go back to your question, was my attempt to add to what I was starting to see. And back then, if you remember, 96, 97, the internet was filled with mostly .edu sites, meaning academic papers. And maybe there was a few personal sites, but they were mostly how I built my deck or how to Shetland ponies and whatnot. Very what's the word? almost, I wouldn't say it was all academic, but none of it was comedy. None of it was absurdist in the beginning.
It was all very sort of like bland, vanilla, just information dump. Like this is the equivalent of the encyclopedia, but index, so you can.
Yeah, we were still coming from that era where paper is expensive, ergo let's not waste it on frivolities. And so when the internet was new, these bytes are important. We should never be like polluting it with garbage. And then I decided maybe I can fill it with some garbage. So, Fractal Cow was my attempt at A, being artistic, and B, being silly. Because I started to see things that influenced me, like Mr. T Ate My Balls and the spam camera, and websites as such that made me think, maybe we can do other stuff with this thing. And that's the reason why I started to make it.
You saw some other people sort of like getting some creativity in there, and you were like, you could do this too. It's not just an academic informational source. It can be fun too. How did you hit upon the idea for Bert Is Evil? Probably your best known project from back then.
I was visiting my sister in Austin, who had a 2-year-old baby at the time. And then I bought the kid a plush doll. And of all the things, so I remember going to the toy store and there was a bunch of like Sesame Street related figures. And I remember looking and there was like maybe one Ernie, 2 Elmos, a big bird, and like 12 Berts. No one's buying Bert. No one wants him. And I just like felt so sad about this toy. And I'm thinking, why does nobody want Bert? And so I got him and brought it back to Sari, who's the kid, my sister's kid. And she didn't want it either. And so I remember going back to the Philippines. I mean, this is me visiting Austin, buying this thing from the airport, I think, giving it to the kid, and she doesn't want it. So eventually, after that vacation, I ended up bringing back the same toy with me. And I had this with me, and I just started imagining the reasons why people don't like him. And that became the start of that website.
It's funny how sometimes just a little piece of inspiration can kind of snowball for you. So
it really does.
So you got inspired and you built, what was the first, because the way the website was set up was there was the main page with like the mugshot of Bert, and then there were all sorts of different little articles. What was the first article you wrote for Bert Is Evil?
The first one, I want to say the JFK, if it wasn't the Hitler one. Those are probably the first 2 that I made. And then also the other piece of context here, Bill, is that at the time I was trying to learn Photoshop. And this was a perfect way for me to play around with the program and give myself a theme that I can work with, scouring the internet for like photos of Bert, cleaning them up, and then putting them in awkward situations.
Yeah, I will say that the Bert Is Evil site and your photoshopping that you did on there actually inspired me when I was about 17 years old. I had my own site about a fictional character's real life adventures called Braindom. Together we can defeat Brain, from Pinky and the Brain. And basically my idea was I was going to have Brain and Pinky and the Brain be responsible for all sorts of different things throughout history and culture. I think the first one I did was the Teletubbies, how Pinky and the Teletubbies was actually a plot by Pinky and the Brain to take over the world. I did that one thing. I never did anything else with it, but yeah, that was my first website and you were the inspiration. So thank you.
Oh man, how fun is that? Thank you so much.
Yeah, we'll link to that really, really shitty website in the show notes. I think the craziest thing I did with it is, and I think I pulled this off CompuServe, there was a little utility that let you morph between pictures. So I took a picture of baby son from Teletubbies and morphed it into Steven Spielberg.
I feel like you showed this to me in an earlier conversation because it's bringing back some memories of me seeing that. I may have seen this.
I very well might have, and we'll definitely link it in the show notes for people. It's kind of crappy, but for some reason, Tripod hasn't taken it down all these years later. I don't have the login anymore or anything, but still, it exists there, and it has a counter on the bottom too. So Bert Is Evil, I heard about it actually on the TV news. How did you find out that your website was being covered by national and local and international news media?
The popularity of the site became more and more through 98, 97, right before the Webbies. and I can talk more about like how I hacked my way into that in my limited ways in a second. But basically, it got featured in a bunch of magazines, the Internet Underground magazine, and it got featured in some CNET magazines that eventually led to it being nominated for the Webbies. And it won the Webbies in 1998. I flew to San Francisco and accepted the award. And then it got really popular after that, to the point where I couldn't support hosting it on my server anymore, because back then in 98, 99, the more people visit your site, the more they charge you for hosting. And so the trend back then was that you would then create mirror sites, and what I ended up doing was I zipped up the whole site and offered it up for to be mirrored by other people. And even now, there's a bunch of mirrors out there of the site. Fast forward to 2001, the site has been running as a mirror for a few years now, and some of them have continued to make content. And somebody in Canada had made content of Bert with Bin Laden. And, and if you understand the theme of the site, this is just par for the course, right? We just have a bunch of, in fact, if I was still running the site, if I was still making stuff at this point, I probably would have made it. But the truth was, it wasn't me. Somebody else made this image. It was of Bert with Bin Laden. And what happened was the image got used on a banner or poster in a rally in Bangladesh post 9/11. Like, it just showed up. And now Reuters saw it, CNN saw it, a bunch of news outlets saw it, and they all called me to confirm, hey, is this from the Bert Is Evil site? And I said, yes. And so now it's all over the news. And for a brief moment in time, I was getting some weird ass death threats from like conservative moms. And
oh wow,
it's pretty funny now, Bill. But back then, you got to understand, I was an international student in America.
Yeah,
and I came to America in '99, and I'm an international student in America, fearing if I was going to be kicked out of the country for this silly thing that I did years ago.
I can imagine that, because, I mean, I don't know the exact regulations on, visas and all that kind of stuff, but I imagine, having artwork associated with you show up in Bangladesh during a protest, they'd probably at least want to ask a couple questions.
They might. And luckily they didn't. Funny enough, fast forward to much later on when I did become a citizen, one of the things, my path to citizenship was to apply for the O1 visa, which is an alien of extraordinary ability visa, which is like something that normally is given to like actors, scientists, or athletes.
Or Superman, probably.
Or Superman. Yeah. People with amazing skill. But if you go down that list of qualifications, there were like 7 of them, and 3 of them I had at the time. Like, 1, you had content that was published internationally, 2, awards for said content, and 3, viewership of content in the millions or whatever. And at the time, Bert Is Evil was that. And so the funny enough, the thing that I feared would cause me to be kicked out of the country is the reason why I got my citizenship. So there you go.
Yeah, that is fun. As media outlets started becoming aware of Bert Is Evil and stuff, did you hear anything about it from the people in your personal life, or was it something you just went and bragged about?
No, I said, I was very proud of that moment where it got nominated and I did win. But back then, Bill, there was no one to brag to, right? It was like, what if I knew you? Maybe I'd tell you about it. I have a few other nerd friends, but it wasn't really something that people cared about back then. And that's one of the reasons why I think I went to San Francisco, because during that the Webby Awards that I went to accept the award, I started to meet all these internet and art luminaries that got me really excited about coming into a city that understood technology as it started to merge with art. That was not something that that was like common any other place. I don't know how it was where you were growing up, but this was very unique at the time.
Yeah, I grew up for the most part in Wheeling, West Virginia, and there was no tech scene there. I was the tech scene in Wheeling, West Virginia. I don't think we had AOL and CompuServe, but we didn't have like an actual ISP until like maybe 98, 99, something in there like that. Very late in the game. Very late in the game. Do you think you would have been working in tech in America if it hadn't been for Bert Is Evil?
I never thought about it that way. So I think the easy answer is probably no, because it really opened up my eyes. So to be clear, when I was in college, I was a fine arts major in the Philippines, studying to be a painter, and my worldview of what it was to be a creator was very much like traditional and limited to like what I understood at the time. This was 1994, 95, 96. I was training to be a fine arts painter, and then, like I said, I went to San Francisco in '98, and I started to see this like merging of the digital arts, the arts and new digital media called the internet. And I thought, gosh, this is what I need to be part of. And it was enough to catalyst me into thinking I need to move to San Francisco. So a year after winning the Webby Awards and like being back in Manila, I decided to fly back to America and continue my studies there. So you're right, Bill. Bert Is Evil was a big part in me moving to the States. It made me realize that there was so much more I could do. I may have found that out eventually, as of course, like a lot of these new medias were coming, and I would have discovered it anyway. But that moment in time, just being at the Webby Awards, being amongst all these amazing people, I met the founder of Burning Man. I saw David Bowie. I didn't talk to him, but he was there. I saw a bunch of like amazing designers and architects and all these people gravitating to this new technology that excited me and made me want to be there and move there.
So we'll come back with a couple questions in just a second, but first, an ad from our sponsor, Streann Studio. So we'll be right back. Where I'm From is brought to you by Streann Studio. That's STREANN Studio, the web app that puts you in charge of the live show. Streann Studio allows you to take your streaming game to the next level by allowing you to stream to multiple platforms at once. If you want to go to Twitch, if you want to go to YouTube, you can stream to all of those platforms at once, get feedback from your audience, and most importantly, it puts you in control of the show. Now, Streann Studio has several packages that work for just about any type of broadcaster. From the free plan, where you can stream with a watermark, all the way up to the gold plan, where you can have up to 8 guests. You can stream to as many social platforms as you want. You can get a web link to share your show with external audiences, and you can even get an iframe so you can embed your live stream show directly into your website. Hey, I love Streann Studio so much, I'm using it to produce this show. I want to thank Streann Studio for supporting Where I'm From, and you can give this fantastic software a spin and support Where I'm From at the same time. Just head over to our website at billmeeks.com/whereimfrom and click on the Streann Studio banner so they know we sent you their way. And we want to thank Streann Studio for sponsoring Where I'm From. Go check it out. Great service. So when you created Bert Is Evil, obviously Webby's noticed. It kind of launched you on a path here to America and the San Francisco area and everything. Did Sesame Street ever have anything to say about it? Because, that is one of their premier characters, Bert and Ernie,
Yeah, I had 2 interactions with them. One was as the site was getting popular, and what I can't remember for sure was whether or not it was after winning or before winning the Webbies. I remember sending a message to someone who worked. Oh no, I think they sent me a message saying hello for whatever reason, and I asked if I was fine, and I remember at the time they said they found it funny, and they shared a photo, and I wish I still had it, like a photo of Bert from one of my drawings in the break room at the Children's Television Workshop. So all to say that they found it funny. They had a sense of humor about it. But this was before 9/11. And then post 9/11, a lawyer from their side did send me a very carefully worded, polite letter of like, hey, we understand this is parody, but is it okay if you take it down? Like they weren't like, it wasn't a cease or desist in in a very like it was actually very polite. It was more like is there a way you can help us mitigate this, because it was getting really ugly at the time. And at that point, I had no control. It wasn't even on my server anymore. All I could really do was put out a statement and say, hey, let's take down the mirrors, because it's hard to believe now, but Bill, this was the first time something from the internet was crossing over to the real news media. It's so commonplace now, but this was a first time for this kind of thing.
Yeah, I would almost say like this is the first thing I can remember that really spoke to modern day internet meme culture, right? Like this was sort of the first internet meme.
It was like I would argue unintentionally became a proto meme, because if you think about it, here's a mirror, take it, make it yours, and other people added to it. Like that whole idea, the mechanism of a meme was born out of this, I think.
I've always been a big like sort of like open source information should be free kind of guy. And I love that you kind of almost federated the site in the early days of the internet and made the mirror to where anyone could go and host their own and create their own variation on the Bert Is Evil site. Were there any that you thought were better than yours? Or
it's funny. Very few, if anything, because the ones that came after, like again, the Bin Laden Bert one was amazing. That was really well done. But many of the ones that came after were just Bert's head pasted on somebody's body, which was never what we did. If you look at the original site, we literally crafted a puppet to be there in a scene and made it look like he was actually in there, shadows and all. It's something that we tried to make him part of a reality that didn't exist, as opposed to just like, going to the OJ trial and pasting Bert's head beside OJ. That was not that was not our shtick. And many of them were like that. And it's unfortunate that that was like the easier thing to do. And that's what people did.
One image that pops into my head that I thought showed a bit of artistry, and apparently you were the artist. I think it was Bert and Ernie at a strip club, and it looks like a nice oil painting almost. It has like that texture to it.
Yeah, thank you. That was one of mine. And a lot of that was because, I was using really low resolution source images, right? I think back then you were lucky if you could make a 500 pixel image. These were like really low res. And so they ended up looking oil painting-y and sleek and like maybe almost like silky because of the lack of resolution. That's the only way I could do it back then.
Since you started life as an artist, and in some ways in your professional career, you have used your artistic skills in a million different directions. What do you feel about AI art that's kind of picked up speed and controversy and everything lately? Like Stable Diffusion is the product I use, for example. Like, what do you think about that in terms of just like being able to type in text and pop out beautiful artwork?
I'll be honest. This might be an evolving opinion, but I'm all for it. I love it. So in fact, so if you every year, me and my wife and my kid, we put a lot of effort in making a holiday card. They're usually a photograph. This year, it was all AI generated. Our Christmas card this year was AI generated, and we're really proud of it.
Nice.
The way I feel about AI art or AI creative assistance is no different from how I feel about the evolution of art in general. If you think about it, back in the 30s, I may be getting my decades wrong, but back in the 30s, I think when photography first came, artists thought that it would destroy painting altogether as an art form. Mm-hmm. But instead, because of photography, painting was unburdened by the need to capture reality. Fauvism, abstraction, expressionism were born because of photography. Because with photography here, and it's able to do a lot of the realistic stuff, we'll just do other stuff. And so the way I feel about this is that with art being generatable or assistable by computers, I believe that humanity will strive harder to find more things to do to become successful artists. Another thing that I'll mention is, as someone who's worked in game development and 3D art, tools have been created over the years to make it easier and easier to generate stuff. For example, it used to be such a pain in the ass to unwrap a model and paint UVs and create normal maps. But now these things are almost instant. And what happens is now the artist or the creator can move a lot of these like technical stuff on the wayside and just concentrate on what's important. And what's happening right now is that working in game development, there's more and more tools where you can just like have AI assisted meshes or scripting like ChatGPT. And eventually it'll just allow us to create better and better art, I think. Now, like I said, it's an evolving opinion in my part. That's what I think now. Maybe it can still go wrong. But, but as far as I can see now, I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, I'm right on the same page with you. Photoshop back in the day would have been considered like, oh, you're going to ruin the professional illustrator who works at a drafting table's way of life and everything. But really, it's just a tool like any other. And I think the thing I like about it is I'm not a great artist by any stretch of the imagination. I do a little bit, but it takes all the busy work, the stuff that you hate doing, like the crap work, it moves all that out of the way so you can just focus on the creativity. And again, it's not as simple as just like typing in a prompt and, oh, you have a beautiful image that is exactly what you wanted. There's a lot of collaging that needs done, and it's called painting with image to image and everything to refine these images. And I still generally bring those images into Photoshop for a final touch, but it's just it's just another tool.
It's another tool. In fact, the way I'm using it right now, similarly to what you just described, is I've been putting together a children's book that I've been writing for the past few years. And instead of, so eventually it's going to be, hand painted and whatnot, or sorry, at least digitally painted by me. But to quickly just go through panel by panel, I've just been using Stable Diffusion, and I've been using Mid-Journey just to give myself understanding of how these panels could look like before I spend the time to actually paint them myself.
Prototyping. You're using it as a prototyping tool, basically.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, I think, there's a lot of pushback from the artistic community about specifically this tool, but these tools in general right now. But I think with technology, you can either fight it or you can learn it and use it to your advantage. And if you fight it, you're going to get left behind, right?
Yeah, exactly. And like you said, the other thing you mentioned that's important to mention is or to drill down in, is like writing those prompts is an artistic skill to itself. Mm-hmm. You have to know your art history. You have to know exactly what you're looking for, right? So case in point, I was trying to come up with a specific look for these characters that I want for this children's book. And I put everything that I thought I wanted in there, and I could not get what I wanted until I put Rankin Bass stop motion still frame. And suddenly all the images started to look like that handcrafted like woodwork with a proper like almost like 3-point lighting to make it all volumetric. That suddenly the art became to life, and it became like what I needed it. And that's stuff that I needed to understand as an art major. It's like, where do I get my influences? And that's not always easy. So I don't think art is going to die, or art history, or understanding art, or even like the craft of art. I think it's just evolving to new ways of using it.
The Rankin Bass thing you mentioned, the Santa Claus episode we did last year, I used Rankin Bass as like my set style for all the B-roll. It's fun. And it's just, there's so much you can do with it. Like, for example, I fed in, for a couple of games on this show, I'd like to have animated characters. Adobe has a great tool called Character Animator that lets you animate via webcam, basically. But you need the characters to do it. So I created a model of characters, like a character template for Character Animator, so I can type in Johnny Knoxville puppet, and it'll give me a graphic that I can take into Photoshop and break apart to use in Character Animator, and boom, I have my own cartoon in a couple hours,
How awesome is that?
Yeah, it's just amazing stuff. All right, Dino, well, we're going to let you go, but I do want to play one game real quick with you, and this game's called Wheel of Anecdotes. Wheel of Anecdotes. So I'm going to give you a suggestion, and your challenge is to respond with a short anecdote from the early internet. The shorter, the better. Make sense?
Okay, got it.
The first word is Usenet.
This is where I think I found a lot of horrible stuff I don't want to talk about right now. but lots of fun.
Fair enough. Okay, IRC.
Met a bunch of local friends through IRC in the Philippines back when servers for chat were starting to show up that I still know to this day through Facebook.
Nice, very nice. It's amazing, like those early internet connections. Like I knew a lot of people in the ZZT game creation community, and I still talk to them. Like we follow each other on Twitter, all that stuff. All right, Yahoo.
Oh, gosh. I remember when it was a search index, and I was trying to figure out how to game it to make sure that more people went to the site. And I think back then you literally had to email, I forget his name, but there was somebody you could email and ask him to put you on top of a category. And if you give him a reason why, he would put you there. And I think I got through this guy.
Man, can you imagine if Google was like that? Like you just had to email the right person and boom, it opened up. Okay, Wired Magazine.
Going back to what you said about what we were talking about with AI generation, I don't know if you remember it, but back in the day, Wired Magazine had full-on pages of just like one quote that have like just some, you open up to a spread and it'll be just like one big quote, and like it was like graphic design in a way you'd never forget it. And there was one quote that I remember from the magazine back in 99 or 98, and it said, everything we can teach a computer is science, everything else is art. I don't know if that's true anymore, but back then it was.
Yeah. Again, great quote until maybe the last 2 years. And then it's like, walking the line. All right, Netscape Navigator.
Oh gosh, Netscape Navigator. Always, you had to optimize for it. It was I'm saddened that it's no longer a thing, but because I loved it as a tool, and I have fond memories of optimizing my site for it. I have memories of putting the little badge on my site, the little thing that says, Netscape Navigator optimized or whatever. It made me so happy to say that I did it. Yep.
The little animated GIF with like the comic going around the end. Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Just out of curiosity, I think like maybe like the grandkid or the step grandkid of Netscape is Firefox. Are you a Firefox user or do you use Chrome?
I'm more of a Chrome guy, honestly. And I think it was more because at the time, there was a moment in time where Chrome was faster and I stuck with it. I don't know if that's true anymore, but it's just all of my bookmarks are there and I can't switch anymore.
Yeah, it takes so much inertia to move to a different browser at this point with everything stored there. Okay, Mr. T ate my balls.
Oh gosh, so I guess this was truly the first meme, I think, and I still have yet to find out who made it, but I have the highest respects for them. It's funny how even now when I find random images of Mr. T ate my balls on the internet, I can hear the same voice I would use when I read it when I was younger. Like, damn, these balls taste good. And I keep hearing the voice in my head when I see these little images.
Hacking.
Oh, okay. So hacking. Back in the early days, it's not even real hacking. It's just a kid trying to game the system. There was this service, I don't know if you remember Link Exchange.
Yes.
So Link Exchange, for the audience, it was basically a banner system where it was like if you put Link Exchange banner spaces on your site, you basically open up your site to host links to other sites, and in return, the more you allow other sites to be viewed as a link on your site will appear in others as well, right? It's a really amazing system of like democratizing advertising on the internet.
And kind of has a taste of like social media to it too, right?
Yeah. So because I'm a jerk, I remember I put the code so you're supposed to put one of those codes per page. I made a page with like 85 of these links on one page, and I created an auto refresher, and I just refresh this constantly every day, and that's how I got Bert Is Evil out there on everybody else's link exchanges. And so I cheated the system, and that's how I gained popularity, as I cheated it. I remember.
Man, if only I had known it was so easy to cheat the system back then. Braindom, the brain site would have been, as big as Bert Is Evil, if not more.
Yeah, I don't know if you would have wanted the infamy of what happened to Bert Is Evil, but yes, that was how I cheated the system. I'm sure they have ways around this now, but back then, I mean, that's how I got it. Yep.
Wheel of Anecdotes. Well, Dino, I'd like to let you know that you won the game. The prize is nothing. But you definitely won. You definitely won. I've never seen someone so excited about nothing before.
I'm just so excited to talk to you, Bill. This has been really, really fun.
Now, Dino, what would you say the biggest impact Bert Is Evil had on your career? Or your life or your career?
Yeah, I think I started to mention it, which is that I'm actually even here in America because of me being exposed to a lot of these things early, which was a big deal. And also like eventually becoming an American, it wasn't because I was sponsored by a company. I basically sponsored myself because of things that I was able to accomplish in my life, as albeit as crazy as they were, they somehow found it good enough to become a citizen for. So that's a big deal. But also like more in the abstract, I think creating a project that was in its time been part of a bigger zeitgeist and understanding how social media worked very early on has really allowed me to think out of the box. And I've tried to apply that in everything I've done. As your audience may or may not know, I've worked in the games industry for a bit now. And even in the projects that I do on the side, like a lot of it comes back to like just me understanding an audience. Like I think being exposed to all this early made me understand the importance of working towards what an audience needs, really trying to figure out what the bigger zeitgeist is. So, in a sense, Bert Is Evil has been a tool for me to become a better designer and all the other things that I do.
I don't have a lot of personal awareness of it, but my kids loved it. Roblox, where you're currently working. I mean, I think there's a lot of DNA shared between a site like Bert Is Evil and the random, custom games and stuff that kids run in Roblox, right?
Yeah. Here, like just to loop it all back full circle, like we were talking about earlier, Bill. The internet was yours and my ability to create content that was like feeding back into something we love, right? We love media. How do we feed back into it? And now, I mean, not to sell, this is not an ad for Roblox, and I don't want it to be, that's not my job here, but Roblox is that. Roblox is basically, how do we allow people to just like create stuff? And it's as easy as like either playing the games, if that's all you want to do, or making games, which is equally as easy. It's almost like we press a button, it's on the server, and other kids play it. It's kind of as magical as the first time you submitted something to an FTP site when you were young. It's that easy. And there's something magical about giving that to kids.
Yeah. And I think, the common thread through a lot of things we're talking about, the early internet, AI, Roblox, it's all about democratizing content creation, right? It's about, trying to break down barriers so people that, while they might not be the best artisan in the world, they can still have a voice and still share what they're all about, right?
That's true. Yep, exactly.
Awesome. Well, Dino, I want to thank you again so much for joining us today. If people want to keep an eye on what you're doing, where can people find that?
You could either follow me on Instagram. My Instagram is Ignacio Graham, basically my last name, Ignacio, and the word Graham. It should be easy. And then on Twitter, I'm really boring. It's just Dino Ignacio. That's my Twitter. I'm not on Twitter as much these days, but I do post a lot on Instagram. But it's a mix of creative projects and family photos. So if you don't mind the family photos, come on in.
Yeah, and less people than ever are posted on Twitter, so you're not too far away from that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Dino. Now, for you guys out there watching, if you like the show, please consider going to Apple Podcasts or wherever you get a podcast and leaving us an honest review to help get the word out about the show. You'll find all the links to where you can find the show over at billmeeks.com/whereimfrom. If you want to watch us record this live, we stream it over on the Facebook, Where I'm From podcast, and on my YouTube channel at Bill Meeks LA. If you want to talk to me about where you're from, or if you have any feedback about what we've discussed on this show, go ahead and shoot me an email, bill@billmeeks.com. Well, that does it for this week. Join us next time when I talk to somebody else about where they're from. See you soon.
That was my understanding of being a creator was.
Ooh, still with us? Oh, we just lost Dino.